The Awakening. The Resurrection. Human soldier Jeffrey Scott's eyes snapped open inside a sterile alien regeneration pod, gasping for air as advanced Talaxian revival technology dragged his consciousness back from the endless black void of death. Jeffrey, groggy, took in his surroundings: sleek bulkheads, blinking control panels, a large viewport revealing the star-flecked endless expanse of space. A tall, gray-skinned alien wearing a crisp white uniform stood over him, large black eyes studying Jeffrey intently. A grim revelation. The alien spoke, its voice oddly calm and resonant. "I am Science Officer Bellows of the Talaxian starship Indomitable. You have been revived after 300 years of cryogenic stasis. I'm afraid I have grave news. Humanity was completely wiped out centuries ago in the devastating Orion War against our shared enemy at the time, the Zorgan Imperium. The last guardian." Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat as the crushing weight of Bellows's words hit him like a sledgehammer. Everyone he had ever known, friends, family, fellow soldiers, had been dead for centuries. He was completely and utterly alone, a living relic of a lost civilization. Jeffrey clenched his fists, muscles tensing as he fought down a surge of despair and existential dread. Bellows continued grimly. "The Zorgan have surged back with a vengeance, overrunning our defenses and slaughtering Talaxians by the billions in their relentless conquest. In desperation, we have revived you and 5,000 other human soldiers from the Orion War era. Your species' legendary combat abilities and unconquerable determination are the last hope for the Talaxian Republic. We need you to do what you do best: kill Zorgan." A reluctant hero. Jeffrey shook his head in disbelief, the sheer enormity of his new reality still refusing to register. He looked at Bellows, eyes burning with barely contained fury as he snarled, "You think you can rip me out of the time I know, tell me everyone I love is dead, and expect me to fight your damn war for you? Why the hell should I lift a finger to help you Talaxians after what your kind did to us during the Orion War?" A dire threat. Bellows's large eyes narrowed, and his gray skin paled even further. "Because if we fall to the Zorgans, those monsters will reanimate the rest of the 200,000 cryogenically frozen human soldiers in our vaults, not as free men like you, but as mindless Zorgan cannon fodder, stripped of sentience and free will, fated to spend eternity as soulless biological robots. Is that what you want for the last remnants of your once great species, Jeffrey Scott?" Acceptance of duty. Jeffrey blanched, his worst fears confirmed. He and his resurrected brothers in arms were the final guardians of humanity's dignity against an enemy that sought to pervert and defile their very essence. Slowly, Jeffrey Scott stood to his full, towering height as an Imperial Terran Ranger, fists clenched in barely restrained fury. "I guess I don't have a choice. But let me make one thing clear. I'm not doing this for you or your precious Talaxian Republic. I'm doing this for humanity, to make sure those Zorgan bastards don't steal the last shred of dignity we have left. If I'm going to war again, it will be on my terms. And may whatever gods are left have mercy on the Zorgan, because my men and I sure as hell won't." The training. A new arsenal. Despite his misgivings, Jeffrey reluctantly agreed to whip the resurrected human soldiers into shape to take on the Zorgans. Bellows led him to a cavernous training facility deep within the Talaxian ship. As they entered, Jeffrey stopped dead in his tracks, eyes widening in disbelief at the sight before him. Row upon row of human soldiers stood at attention, clad head to toe in sleek black-powered exoskeletons. The armor plates hummed and whirred softly with advanced servomotors and integrated tactical systems. Each soldier carried a menacing energy rifle that crackled with barely contained destructive potential. Cutting-edge technology. "What the hell is all this?" Jeffrey asked incredulously, reaching out to wrap his knuckles on the nearest soldier's chest plate with a dull clank. Powered armor. Plasma guns. This tech is centuries beyond anything we had back in my day. A fighting chance. Bellows nodded, hands clasped behind his back. Zorgan troops have physical abilities far exceeding baseline humans. These exosuits will allow your soldiers to match their speed, strength, and resilience in combat. The pulse rifles can burn through Zorgan kit and armor and put them down for good. With this edge, you may stand a chance. Drill Sergeant Mode. Jeffrey let out a low whistle. Can't argue with that. All right, you sorry sacks of listen up, he barked, easily falling back into the role of grizzled drill sergeant. Just because you've got fancy gear doesn't mean you're ready for a damn thing. Time to train until you puke, sleep, then train some more. I'll make real soldiers out of you if it kills me again. Forging a unit. As the weeks blurred by in a haze of endless drills and combat sims, Jeffrey had to admit he was impressed. The men and women under his command took to the new weapons and armor like they were born for it. He forged them into a cohesive fighting unit, bonded by the shared knowledge that they were all that remained of Earth's once mighty military. Sergeant Emir Yus, a giant bear of a man who'd served in the Egyptian interplanetary forces, acted as Jeffrey's right hand. Private Ava Petro, a whip-smart Russian soldier with a gift for tactics, quickly distinguished herself among the recruits. Jeffrey even found common ground with Corporal Feng, a Chinese Marine who shared his disdain for the arrogant Talaxians. Together, they were the beating heart of humanity's last warriors. A rising tension. The only dark cloud was Admiral Jan, the Talaxian commander who viewed Jeffrey's unit with barely disguised contempt. He was a hard-ass even by Jeffrey's standards, constantly breathing down their necks and pushing for immediate deployment. Your soldiers are ready enough, Terran. Admiral Jan growled impatiently after observing a training session. Further delays are intolerable. The Zorgans draw closer by the day. I will not let your hesitation doom us all. Confrontation. Jeffrey got right up in the Admiral's face, matching his heated glare. My men are not disposable pawns for you to throw into the meat grinder, Jan. A few weeks of training isn't enough. A tense exchange. You forget your place, human. Jan hissed. You are a weapon, nothing more. A blunt instrument to wield against the Zorgan. I am your superior, and you will deploy when I command it. Seeking solace. Jeffrey clenched his fists, barely resisting the urge to deck the arrogant alien then and there. He whirled away, storming off in a huff before his temper got the better of him. That condescending prick had no idea what real human soldiers were capable of. Predictably, he found Bellows on the observation deck, staring pensively out at the stars. The Talaxian science officer was the only one Jeffrey could halfway stand on this damned ship. The battle begins. A desperate situation. The strategic briefing was already underway when Jeffrey and Bellows slipped into the crowded room. Admiral Jan stood at the front, his face grim as he gestured to a holographic star map. Angry red icons representing Zorgan ships swarmed across the display like locusts. The situation is critical, Jan said, his voice tight. The Zorgan have broken through our lines in Sector 29. New Faxis and its 3 billion civilians are now at risk. Our forces are in full retreat. Taking the lead. Jeffrey's heart sank as he studied the map. The Talaxian ships were scattered and disorganized, no match for the relentless Zorgan advance. He glanced at Bellows, seeing his own fears reflected in the science officer's dark eyes. Admiral Jan zoomed in on a small blue icon at the edge of the map. We have only one card left to play, the human soldiers. They're the only reserves we have available to plug the gap. A heavy responsibility. Every eye in the room turned to Jeffrey. He squared his shoulders, meeting their expectant gazes head-on. His troops weren't ready, not by a long shot, but there was no other choice. We'll do it, Jeffrey said, his voice ringing with a confidence he didn't quite feel. The Zorgan won't know what hit them. Rallying the troops. As the briefing broke up, Jeffrey pulled Bellows aside. I don't like this, he muttered, watching Admiral Jan stride away. Jan's throwing us to the wolves. He doesn't think we'll come back from this. A promise of support. I'll watch out for you, Bellows promised, gripping Jeffrey's shoulder. Focus on keeping your people alive. Leave the politics to me. Into the fire. Jeffrey nodded grimly and went to find his soldiers. They were already gearing up, checking weapons and sealing their armor. He could see the tension in their faces, the knowledge that this was no training sim heavy in the air. Sergeant Yuss fell in beside Jeffrey as they boarded the transport ships, his powered exoskeleton whirring softly. What's the plan, boss? We going in hard and fast. The first engagement. Hard and fast, Jeffrey confirmed, slapping a magazine into his pulse rifle. We'll hit their flanks, buy time for the Talaxians to regroup. And Sergeant, leave none standing. A new reality. The human ships tore out of hyperspace at the ragged edge of the Talaxian perimeter, and Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat. It was a scene straight out of hell. Talaxian and Zorgan ships clashed in a storm of fire, missiles, and energy beams crisscrossing the void. Fighters swirled and died like sparks from a raging inferno. And in the distance, the green-blue jewel of New Thaxis hung vulnerable, hundreds of Zorgan ships driving relentlessly towards its defenseless cities. A grim determination. Holy. Private Petro breathed over the comms. There are so many of them. An unyielding resolve. Jeffrey shook himself, tearing his eyes away from the carnage. Cut the chatter. We've got a job to do. But as he led the dropship screaming down towards the planet's surface, a cold knot of doubt settled in his gut. What difference could a few thousand humans possibly make against a force like this? They'd need a miracle to even survive, let alone turn the tide. But he'd be damned if he'd let his doubts show. His soldiers needed him to be strong, to lead them through the fire. The ground assault. The invasion begins. The Zorgan filled the skies above New Thaxis, their monstrous ships disgorging hordes of chidness warriors. Jeffrey could see columns of smoke rising from burning cities, the distant screams of civilians reaching them even through the roar of the dropship engines. The last stand. 30 seconds. He barked over the comms. Remember your training. Watch your sectors. Cover your buddies. We go in hard. We hit them with everything we've got. And we don't stop until every last Zorgan is dead or off this planet. Am I clear? A fierce resolve. Hurrah! His soldiers roared as one, the dropship shaking with the force of their cry. Jeffrey's hands tightened on his rifle as the ramp slammed down, alien air whipping at his face. He could see the Zorgans swarming below, their insectoid bodies glinting in the harsh sunlight. This was it, humanity's last stand. Time to show these ugly bastards what Terran steel was made of. The battle for New Thaxis. Move out. Jeffrey hit the ground hard as a barrage of plasma bolts sizzled overhead, the acrid stench of ozone burning his nostrils. All around him, the human soldiers crouched behind mounds of rubble and wrecked vehicles, energy rifles spitting blue fire at the advancing Zorgan. Holding the line. Hold the line. Jeffrey roared over the chaos of battle, rising to one knee and drilling a trail of shots into a charging Zorgan trooper. The alien warrior stumbled and fell, ichor spraying from ruptured plates of ketin. We are all that stands between these bugs and 3 billion civilians. If we fall here, the Talaxians are finished. A desperate retreat. Private Petro scrambled up beside him, her face streaked with grime and sweat beneath her helmet. There's too many of them, she cried, panic edging into her voice as she fired wildly down the street. We can't hold them back. A rallying call. Jeffrey grabbed her shoulder, giving her a rough shake. Get it together, soldier. This is what we trained for. These civilians are counting on us. He pointed to a distant spire rising above the city's skyline. We fall back to the Thaxis Commerce Tower. Move. A tactical withdrawal. The human soldiers broke cover and sprinted down the rubble-strewn streets, plasma bolts cracking past them as the Zorgan surged forward. Jeffrey saw Sergeant Yuss catch a shot to the chest, his armor sparking and hissing. The big man stumbled but kept running, his face twisted in a grimace of pain. A last stand. They reached the base of the commerce tower, just as the first Zorgan rounded the corner behind them, the alien's serrated mandibles clacking with bloodthirsty anticipation. Jeffrey and his troops piled into the lobby, energy beams shattering the glass doors and ripping chunks from the concrete walls, setting a trap. Defensive positions, Jeffrey barked, soldiers scrambling to take cover behind thick structural columns and overturned desks. Petro, Feng, get those denopacks rigged. I want this whole damn building ready to come down on my signal. A fierce determination. The two soldiers nodded and sprinted for the stairwells, satchels of explosives bouncing on their hips. Jeffrey could only pray they worked fast. The Zorgans were closing in, their numbers seeming to multiply with each passing second. A clawed hand seized the edge of Jeffrey's barricade, a nightmarish insectoid face looming over him. He shoved his rifle barrel into the Zorgan's mandibles and pulled the trigger, painting the wall behind it with shattered chitin and ichor. A fight to the death. Come on, you bastards. Jeffrey snarled, ejecting a spent power cell and slamming home a fresh one. You want this planet. You'll have to dig us out of the rubble first. A relentless onslaught. The battle raged through the tower lobby and lower floors, the human soldiers fighting with the desperate fury of cornered rats. Jeffrey lost count of the Zorgans he put down, his rifle growing hot in his hands as he poured shot after shot into the oncoming horde. A grim determination. A clatter of boots behind him announced Feng and Petro's return, their faces grim. Charges are set, Feng reported, snapping a quick salute. Buildings rigged to blow from top to bottom. Just give the word. A desperate gamble. Jeffrey risked a quick glance out the shattered windows. Zorgans were pouring into the square outside, a chittering tide of chitin and claws. They had only moments before the aliens swarmed the building and overwhelmed them completely. He keyed his comm, his voice ringing out to every human soldier still fighting. All units, fall back. Get clear of the building. The final blow. As his troops broke cover and sprinted for the rear exits, Jeffrey held his ground, energy rifle thrumming as he poured fire into the Zorgan ranks. Just a few more seconds. Just a few more to buy his soldiers time to escape. The Zorgans surged forward, clambering over the barricades and the bodies of their fallen kin. Jeffrey glimpsed Sergeant Yus lying motionless against a pillar, his armor rent and blackened. Private Ava screamed as a Zorgan bore her to the ground, claws tearing at her helmet. The sacrifice, a desperate stand. With a roar of defiance, Jeffrey thumbed the detonator switch. The world vanished in a storm of light, heat, and sound. Explosions ripped through the tower's support beams, millions of tons of steel and concrete crumbling in on itself like a house of cards. Jeffrey had a momentary sensation of weightlessness, of flying through the air amidst a maelstrom of dust and debris. Then everything went black as something heavy slammed into him, and the world spun away into oblivion. Emerging from the rubble, he came to in a haze of pain, every breath sending spikes of agony lancing through his chest. Jeffrey pried his eyes open, blinking away the blood trickling into them. He was lying half-buried in a mound of pulverized concrete and twisted metal girders, the remains of the commerce tower rising in a jagged mountain of rubble around him. Through the settling dust, Jeffrey could make out the huddled shapes of his surviving soldiers, bloody and battered but still alive. A temporary victory. Beyond them, the street had vanished beneath a ridge of debris 3 stories high, broken Zorgan bodies jutting from the rubble. The alien's advance halted for now. Jeffrey dragged himself upright with a groan, his muscles screaming in protest. Sound off, he croaked into his comm. Who's still with me? Counting the cost. One by one, the human soldiers checked in. Yus, Ava, Feng, a dozen others. Out of the 100 who had made the drop, barely 30 remained. But they had bought new Thax's precious time. The Zorgans would not roll over the planet unopposed. A resolute stance, Jeffrey staggered to the edge of the rubble and stared up at the smoke-shrouded sky, the taste of blood and ash thick on his tongue. The battle still raged in orbit, the flash of ships and missiles visible even in broad daylight. He knew this was only the beginning. The Zorgans would regroup, come at them again and again, until the cities of New Thaxis lay in ruins and the planet's defenders were ground to dust. But Jeffrey would be damned if he'd let that happen without making the aliens bleed for every inch. Rallying the troops, his soldiers gathered around him, their faces exhausted but resolute beneath the grime and blood. They looked to him, ready to follow him into hell itself if that's what it took. "We hold the line," Jeffrey said, his voice hard as he met each of their gazes in turn. "We hold until there's no one left to hold it. The Zorgans want this planet. They're going to have to dig our bodies out of the rubble and pry it from our cold, dead hands. We're humanity's last warriors. It's time we reminded the galaxy what that means." A new directive. Jeffrey's comm crackled to life as he crouched behind a shattered wall, energy sizzling overhead. "Jeffrey, come in." Bellows's voice was strained, barely audible over the cacophony of battle. "Admiral Jan has ordered the fleet to withdraw. He's leaving New Thaxis to the Zorgans. Defiance against orders." "He's what?" Jeffrey roared, fury and disbelief warring in his chest. "That spineless son of a... He's abandoning us. A loyal ally." "Not all of us," Bellows said urgently. "Many of the officers refuse to obey Jan's orders. We will not abandon you, Jeffrey. I'm bringing every ship and soldier still loyal to reinforce your position. Hold fast, we're coming." A fierce resolve. Jeffrey clenched his fists, a fierce grin splitting his face. "You heard the man." He bellowed over the comm to his soldiers. "The Talaxians are on their way. We just have to hold these ugly bastards a little longer." A renewed assault. A ragged cheer went up from the human lines, and they poured renewed fire into the advancing Zorgans. Jeffrey rose from cover, his rifle spitting blue plasma bolts as he led the charge. "Drive them back. For Earth, for Talax, for every world these monsters have destroyed." A relentless defense. The humans surged forward, a tide of black armor and flashing energy weapons. They met the Zorgan head-on, the air filling with the shrieks of wounded aliens and the crackle of pulse fire. Jeffrey was in the thick of it, his rifle blazing as he carved a path through the chitinous horde. But for every Zorgan that fell, two more seemed to take its place. Jeffrey saw humans dragged down by sheer weight of numbers, vanishing beneath piles of thrashing alien bodies. The line was buckling on the verge of collapse. A timely arrival. "Hold steady," Jeffrey cried, desperation creeping into his voice. "Just a little longer. They're almost here." Reinforcements arrive. As if on cue, a shadow fell over the battlefield. Jeffrey looked up to see dozens of Talaxian dropships screaming out of the sky, energy cannons flaring. The ships disgorged hundreds of Talaxian Marines, their sleek armor painted with the colors of Bellows's faction. The Marines charged into battle with a roar, portable energy shields flaring to life before them. They crashed into the Zorgan rear like a hammer blow, plasma cannons cutting bloody swaths through the aliens' ranks. A united front. "For Talax," Bellows roared, a plasma rifle in each fist as he led the charge. "For our human brothers." The turning point. A strategic advantage. Caught between the Talaxian onslaught and the humans' unyielding defense, the Zorgan faltered. Jeffrey rallied his soldiers, urging them forward. "Now, while they're reeling, drive them out of the city." A vicious melee. The humans and Talaxians surged forward as one, blades flashing and rifles thundering. The Zorgan fell back, their lines shattering under the relentless assault. Jeffrey lost himself in the chaos of close-quarters battle, his armor streaked with ichor and his muscles burning with exhaustion. Facing the warchief. A shadow loomed over him, and Jeffrey spun to find himself facing a towering Zorgan warchief, the alien's armor thick with trophies and battle scars. The warchief bellowed a challenge, mandibles flaring as it raised a crackling energy glaive. Jeffrey bared his teeth in a feral grin, activating the humming power blade sheathed in his gauntlet. A deadly duel. "Come on, Big Ugly," he growled. "Let's dance." The final clash. They came together in a clash of sparks and chitin, the warchief's glaive slamming against Jeffrey's blade with bone-jarring force. Jeffrey staggered back, the servos in his armor whining with strain. The Zorgon was monstrously strong, its blows coming down like meteor strikes. But Jeffrey was fast, his armor-enhanced reflexes letting him slip under the warchief's guard. He landed a flurry of slashes across the alien's chest and thighs, ichor spraying from the rents in its chitin. A fierce determination. The warchief roared in fury, renewing its assault with terrifying ferocity. Jeffrey gave ground, step by step, his blade flickering as he parried the Zorgon's hammering blows. His muscles burned, his breath coming in ragged gasps inside his helmet. The warchief pressed its advantage, forcing Jeffrey back towards a crumbling wall. At the last second, Jeffrey twisted aside, the glaive's crackling blade missing his head by inches. A decisive strike. The warchief's momentum carried it forward, and Jeffrey struck. His blade plunged into the gap beneath the alien's arm, ripping free in a spray of ichor, and buried it to the hilt in the warchief's neck. The Zorgon convulsed, glaive falling from its nerveless claws. It slumped to the rubble-strewn ground, ichor pooling around Jeffrey's feet. He yanked his blade free, chest heaving as he stared down at his vanquished foe. A hard-fought victory. All around him, the battle was turning. The Zorgons were in full retreat, fleeing back towards their landing ships as the humans and Talaxians harried them every step of the way. Bellows appeared at Jeffrey's side, his armor dented and scorched, but his eyes alight with fierce joy. "We've done it," the Talaxian cried, clasping Jeffrey's shoulder. "The city is saved." A sobering reality. Jeffrey nodded wearily, suddenly feeling every ache and bruise. "Thanks to you and your people. I thought Jan had doomed us all." A bond forged in battle. "Not all Talaxians are like him," Bellows said solemnly. "Many of us believe in honor, in loyalty. We would not abandon our human comrades." A mutual respect. Jeffrey met the alien's eyes, seeing the respect and camaraderie shining there. "I won't forget this, Bellows. We're in this together now, until the end. The aftermath and beyond." A new threat. As the humans and Talaxians regrouped in the city's shattered streets, tending to the wounded and gathering the dead, Jeffrey couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the exhaustion and grief. They had held the line. They had proven that humans and Talaxians could fight and bleed as one. And as long as soldiers like Bellows stood with them, maybe humanity had a chance after all. But the battle was nowhere near the end. Beyond the smoke-shrouded city, thousands of Zorgon ships still darkened the skies. Jeffrey knew they would return, more determined than ever to crush the human resistance and grind Talax beneath their claws.